And there it is, episode 165, the last episode in 2023. So instead of the usual topics that might be slightly heavy at times, or nuanced, or controversial, or intellectual, today I'm bringing you something lighter. I'm bringing you an episode that will hopefully take you virtually fishing, and will take you fishing for a big fish in the warm waters of Gulf of Mexico. Our guest today is Bob Gonzalez. Bob is a very experienced big game angler. He's an angler in general, but majority of what we're going to focus today is angling for big game fish, marlin, tuna, grouper, snapper, this sort of thing. And Bob also wrote a book. The book is titled A Flicker in the Water. There it is. And let me tell you, this is a great book. I initially took it like, it's not a very thick book. It has a lot of beautiful photos, illustrations of a big fish. And, I started reading that book like you read review books. You try to get quickly through the book and schedule the interview. And about halfway through, I go like, man, this is very enjoyable book to read. So I ended up reading that book twice over. I'm not kidding you. I read the book, I scheduled an interview, and then I just sat down and I was just reading that book again, being delighted at what I'm reading and soaking it all in and just enjoying it. So you can obviously buy that book as usual. The link is in the description of the show and in my newsletter and everywhere. So if you're looking for a Christmas present for your anglers in your family, or maybe just not in your family, but for your anglers, or maybe for your own pleasure, just go ahead and buy that book, A Flicker in the Water. And as if my recommendation is not enough, I can tell you that the book has a foreword by Mariel Hemingway. She's a granddaughter of Ernest Hemingway. And, that is, when it comes to the angling and fishing book, I guess this is as good of the credentials as it gets. So, excellent book. And listening to our conversation, you will learn not only about marlin tournaments and, certain techniques for fishing for those big fish, but you will also learn about the weather and weather patterns, how it is in the Gulf of Mexico and in Florida. And for those of you who would like to go for their bucket list fishing holidays in Florida, I ask Bob about all the details, what are the best months to go there, how to book a charter boat, and what type of boats you're going to book, and how much does it cost, and all the details. So you can also get some useful information for your next fishing holidays. And so I'm pretty sure you will enjoy this conversation as much as I did having it with Bob. And enjoy. Bob, welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you here.
Hello, Tommy. It's great to be here.
I haven't had that much fun reading a book for a while. I read a lot of books. It was really nice. Book about fishing with a lot of photos. Very enjoyable read. Tell me and tell us, what was your motivation to write that book? And I presume that while you're going to be talking about your motivation to write that book, you can also tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, the motivation was that I had stopped fishing for a while, and I had a lot of stories accumulated I thought people would enjoy and maybe learn a few things from, like I did while I was writing the book. And the writing the book was my way of still continuing to fish and be out there, and it put me out there as well as all the readers. So I'm right there with you. I grew up in Pennsylvania, which is in the northeastern part of the U.S. I used to play college baseball. We used to come down to Florida during the spring, and one year I decided, it's 70 degrees down here, it's 40 up in Pennsylvania, so I want to come down here full time. So one year when baseball season was over, I moved to Florida, and I came here and I made a living down here in Florida where I live now. I've been here 30 years.
And fishing is is what you do for how you spend your free time.
Well, the place that I moved to called Destin is known as the world's luckiest fishing village. And when I first came here, I still remember I drove over what's called the Destin Bridge, where there's a big sign, world's luckiest fishing village. And I looked out on the Gulf of Mexico and I thought, wow, this is what Christopher Columbus must have felt like on his first voyage, discovering the new world. You know, that's exactly what it felt like, because it was such a different thing than Pennsylvania, where I had grown up. I used to fish in Pennsylvania every once in a while. We would go to the coast of New Jersey and fish for bluefish and in the summer and cod in the winter. And you'd catch an occasional albacore or sea bass or something like that. But the variety of fish that's down here is just unbelievable. You know, you've got wahoos and marlin and sailfish and grouper and snappers. I mean, it's just incredible. So I came here. I opened up a small business, actually. It's a soft pretzel business, and I called it the Pretzel Twister. And then I named the boat the Twister after the business. So I began to fish.
Smart move.
Yeah, I started fishing all the time, and I fished for about 15 years, and then I didn't fish for a while. Sold the boat. Now I go out with friends mostly. But I still go. I just went last week, and it was really rough that day, though. I like to go out on the nice days. It makes all the difference in the world. Although sometimes on those rough days, the fish bite. You know, so you just never know.
I think this is like when you're like in this initial phase where you're just like when it's just so hot and fishing, you want to go fishing, you go every day. And then once you've done a little bit, you're just like, no, I'm just going to pick a nicer day.
Yeah, I mean, those nice days make all the difference in the world. But not to the fish, though. The fish bite nice or calm or rough or not rough. It has more effect on the fisherman than it does the fish.
Bob, tell us the stories described in the book. When are they happening? So are they spread across like multiple years, or where they're all happening in the single years? Like, what's the time frame? I'm trying to.
Oh yeah, multiple years. There's stories there that go back 20 years, even 30 years. I talk about some of the experiences my dad had in Cuba, because he was raised in Cuba. And I talk about how he used to fish as a 10, 11-year-old with a hand line and not a reel. And I talk about some of the experiences he had in New Jersey when he first came to the U.S. And then I start talking about some of my experiences here in the Gulf and in the Atlantic. We had a few in the Atlantic. I talk about the Bahamas and the Keys. I love Isla Morada in the Keys is fantastic for fishing, as is Key West. And the Bahamas, too. And if you ever want to see the most clear water in your life, is go to the Bahamas, man. That's just unbelievable how clear that water is.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Maybe one day that's a bucket list fishing destination, I guess, for me.
Yeah.
Bob, you're an angler for many, many years, obviously. Tell me, like, did you see like differences in the catches? So there's this concept of shifting baseline that people think that something is normal. What their father would say, it's a poor fishing. So we going like a decline is worse and worse and worse. Is there anything of that you're observed over the years in terms of catches, either the number of fish or the size of fish that you or your people were catching, like 20 years ago and now?
Well, there have been so many changes. When I was fishing, 20 years ago, you could fish for any species any day of the year and catch as many as you wanted. Now they only open up for a few weeks a year in some cases, and you're only allowed like one or two of certain species, not even all of them. You have to throw back. Snapper might be open and you might be able to catch two, but grouper will be closed. And then the opposite, grouper might be open and then snapper might be closed. Before, they all used to be open at the same time. So what I'm seeing is, though, that's really helping the fish population. There's plenty of fish out there and they're growing. It gives them a chance to get big. So in that window that you do get to catch them, you're going to get some nice fish.
And that's a very, very positive thing, I guess, because, like I'm recording this podcast and there's often anglers talking, and, the story is the same, that there's less and less fish and they're smaller and smaller. But then, I guess where you're fishing, the regulations are quite strict. Can you tell us a little bit more about those regulations in terms like who is deciding about the regulations, and then who is enforcing, and how does it look like, and then how recreational anglers need to adjust to be in compliance with those.
Well, here we have in Florida, the state waters go out for 9 miles, and then after that it becomes federal waters. So for up to 9 miles, the state of Florida is the one who makes the rules for the fisheries, what you can catch, what time of year you can catch them, and how many. And and they've gotten strict. I see them down at the docks all the time. They're always checking. Anytime a boat comes in, they'll ask you to open your cooler and they'll even go in the cooler and inspect the cooler. And just to see, they want to make sure everybody's following the regulations. It didn't used to be like that. Not as bad anyway. I mean, you would see them once in a while, but not like it is today. So anybody who's out there fishing, make sure you always have a fishing license and you always follow the regulations because they will check. After 9 miles, it becomes federal water. But the thing is, though, you have to pass the state waters on your way back in. So you always be careful out there, too. Always, anytime you're fishing anywhere locally, know what the rules are and make sure you follow them. Now, on a charter boat, they'll usually take care of that stuff for you. They have the licenses and everything, and they know what the regulations are. So you don't have to worry about that if you're going to charter a boat. But if you're on your own on a private boat, then definitely, know the rules and have the license you need.
Is license expensive?
No, I think it's only like $20 or $30 for a full year. And they even have if you're a senior citizen, like I'm getting close to being, they give you a discount and free in some cases.
Okay. So it's not that bad. But overall, do you think this is good that they're regulating this so much, or do you think the regulations are a little bit overboard? Like, what's your, like an overall feeling? Because obviously you're aware that the state of the environment in many places is not that great, and we don't have that many catches as we used to in many parts of the world. I don't know how about where you are.
As a fisherman, it is a little restricting and imposing sometimes because it's hard to catch a really nice fish and have to throw it back, which happens. But as a conservationist and you wanting to see the resource and a lover of fish and nature, then I like the catch and release, which I do plenty of anyway, even without the restrictions. I like seeing renewing the resource and having the fish multiply and be there for future generations. I like all that. And I definitely like, if I'm going to catch a fish, I want to be able to eat them. I don't want to just catch them just to catch them, So all those things to keep in mind.
Yeah, this is always this balance, right? Where you get a feed.
And nowadays, I like it where if you catch like a big game fish, like a marlin or a sailfish or something, you don't need to bring him back to the dock. You can just kind of measure the neck and the width, and they can make a mold for you and hang it up. You see, I don't know if you could see, but see right there in the on the wall?
I can see the fish on the wall. Yeah,
that's a 42-pound red snapper that we caught. That was only 3 pounds shy of the state record.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's a replica of that. It's not taxidermy.
It's a replica. Although that fish, we did bring in and we took it to the fish market, but it is a replica of it.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah. And so are the regulations for Mar? So let's talk about now the billfish, the marlin, the sailfish, the big fish, big game fishing. How does the regulation of that look like? And are there any regulations on tackle that you need to use? Like, how does it look like?
Well, usually for the big game fish, you're going to need bigger tackle. You can use what they call an 80 wide or 130 wide. 130 is the biggest. And if you're going to use that, you're going after just strictly a big blue marlin or a big swordfish, and that's it. You don't need something that big pretty much for anything else, unless you hook a big shark or something. Actually, I'll tell you something interesting. Here in the Gulf of Mexico, just a couple of weeks ago, they broke the existing blue marlin record.
Wow!
For a blue, yeah.
How big was it?
For a blue marlin caught in the Gulf, it was 1,145 pounds.
Wow!
Yeah, the Florida had the previous record, which was 1,045 pounds, so it beat the by 100 pounds. That one was caught out of Alabama, which is a little bit past the Panhandle of Florida there. They fished out of a place called Orange Beach, and it shattered the Alabama record, which had been like 800 pounds. But that was only a couple weeks ago.
Did they brought it to the dock, or did they release it?
They brought it to the dock. Yeah, They waited and everything. Yeah, they brought it to the dock because the fish died during the fight.
Okay.
Yeah, so they brought it to the dock and they waited and everything. Yeah, but I mean, it's a sign that the fishery is healthy. You know.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And you're describing in your book a few of those epic fights with massive fish, and we get to that in a second because I have a few questions about it. But just on a theme of billfish being marlin or swordfish, are there any regulations that are telling you when can you release the fish and where can you have to release the fish and when can you bring it back? Is it like is that regulated?
Well, for the marlin, it depends on the tournament. Actually, tournaments also set their own rules, and if usually when you're fishing in a marlin tournament, some of them you don't have to bring them back. You measure them, take a picture of them, and they're satisfied with that. Other ones, they have to be of a certain size or length to bring back, and everyone is different. So there's conservation is definitely a priority for most tournaments and most fishing associations. Now, I will say this, though. If you're ever out there and you happen to catch what you know is a big fish, don't let anybody else touch your line because it will disqualify the fish.
Yes, I heard that only the only leader can be touched by the deckhand.
Right.
Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The rod and reel cannot be touched by anyone else other than the angler.
These are IGFA rules, I think. That's what I heard. That's what I read.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so listen, but anyway, if you're just taking boat out, right, and you're after a big fish and you hook up to the marlin, right, let's say, I don't know, 600 pounds or something. How do you know if you can bring it back or you have to release it? Like, what is the rule then if you're just fishing outside a tournament?
Well, you'll know. I mean, every state is different. But here in Florida, they change the rules all the time. I think the fish has to be, I don't know if it's 60 or 48 feet in length to be able to keep them for the marlin. And they're definitely not sellable, so you can't bring it back thinking you're going to take it to the market because you can't do that here.
So it's regulated by size, essentially, like under certain size, they need to be released.
Yeah.
And you can bring them over a certain size. Okay. Yeah, that's what I was curious about. And then surely you have the way to estimate, like on the side of the boat, how big is a fish. And listen, Bob, I have a question that is something that I heard about before I read your book, and I was always wondering like how that works. And then you describing in your book an epic fight with a yellowfin tuna, and you're talking about a situation where an angler is about to get spooled, that ran out of a line on his reel, and then you're tying another line to this line and you're unclipping the reel, unscrewing or whatever the reel, throwing it over the board, and then you start fighting the fish on another tackle from another reel and another rod and line. Tell us and tell me how the mechanics of that work. Like how you do this and how all that works, because I never could wrap my head around it.
Well, if you're lucky enough to get a bite like that where you're about to get spooled, which happened to us, spooled is when you run out of line. And once you run out of line on the reel and there's no more, the fish is gone. He takes all your line with him. So sometimes what you have to do is attach another line to the original line. So you'll take the tip of the line from another reel and you'll attach it to the line that's existing in the water, from the boat, out of the tip of the other line. And then you'll throw that one in the water. And sometimes you can lose the rod and reel, but you have to throw them in the water. And then you'll have the second rod and reel in your hand, and you're fighting the fish through the other line and through the other rod and reel that's in the water. But you're attached to another fish. And actually, this fish actually spooled us on the second one, which was amazing. So we knew it was a big fish. But, like tunas, the bite stopped. He just took one. He just stopped. He didn't have a run in him, and then that's when we started working him back towards the boat. But he almost spooled us on 2 reels, which was incredible.
Wow! So obviously, you gotta stop the fish on the first rig to be able to tie the line So the line cannot be moving because you need to tie, like, I presume there's a special knot to attach the
Yeah,
second
there's a
line.
special knot that you tie the second line to, and you can even use rubber bands and things like that to secure it. And then you can use it also. Use a harness on around your waist, hold the rod and reel in there too, because once that you want to do all this stuff and have preparations ahead of time, because if you wait until the fish bites, it's too late. You have to know what you're gonna do before this happens.
Yeah. And so, but tell me, like, when you're tying the new line to the old line is still going through all the rings in the rod and goes to the to the reel. So are you throwing like the rod and reel, or you're just like, how does that? Are you tying this and just cutting it before it, and before you throw it? Like, how does that mechanically work?
You're throwing the rod and reel in the water. You're taking the line from the second reel and attaching it to the first reel, and you're tying it to the reel of the first rod with the line. And then once it's secure enough, then you throw the reel in the water with the rod, and you have that second one in your hand.
Gee whiz, man. This is yeah. Thanks for explaining that. I was just wondering. And then obviously once you're lucky enough to start retrieving the line, then you see like at first like, oh, I have my old reel. So then you get the and then you continue playing the fish or fighting a fish on the first reel again.
Right.
Wow. Is it happening often?
Well, it happens every once in a while. Yeah. Yeah. This reel in this case that I wrote about in the book happened to be brand new too. So once we threw it in the water, you never know if you're going to get it back or not. But luckily, we were able to get it back.
Gee, this is. But is it, when it happens, is it lack of preparation, or is it like you hook up a fish you didn't expect it to hook up, or is it just like sometimes it happens?
You hook up a fish you didn't expect to hook up, but you always have to be prepared. Always be prepared for everything out there. Make sure all the knots are fastened the way they should be. Make sure all the drags, which means the give and take on the reel, is set to a good resistance, so the fish doesn't snap. If he pulls too hard, the line won't snap. That sort of thing. The ice in the coolers, you have to make sure everything is as a fisherman, you have to, everything you can control, knots, reels, everything. You should do that all ahead of time, because you're going to lose some anyway. That happens to every fisherman, but everything that you can control beforehand, you have to do to make your chances better of landing the fish.
Yeah, for sure. And look, like, so if you need to do this maneuver with the attaching second rod, then I presume, well, you need a second person. So that's not a fish that you can claim in any tournament or whatever, because am I right? Or are there people who are able to do it themselves to tie that?
No, you need a second person. Usually a fish like that wouldn't be eligible for a tournament.
Oh, imagine so. Wow. That was, I was only once, it happened to me, not to me, but on a boat when I was we hook up to a porbeagle shark, and we didn't expect that. Yeah. And the guy, like we thought he gonna get spooled, because there was like no stop to the shark. And the skipper fired the engine and started chasing after the shark. So that, made give us enough time. Not us, like the angler was able to kind of like tire the shark, so we stopped him and then reel him in. And it was like, wow, man, the adrenaline and the whole,
the adrenaline is unreal. I know, it's just nothing like it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Bob, tell me, what is your most memorable fish or biggest fish, or the one that it's like the one you remember the most? And is it even one in the book? Because sometimes the most memorable fish is the one that you caught when you were 6, so that counts too. For my question.
Yeah. I have a few memorable ones. That tuna that we talked about was memorable. That snapper on the wall is memorable. I remember the one, I talk about it in the book, a blue marlin, as we were driving by a pallet that was floating out there, took off on this bait and came out of the water like a monster. And he ran with this bait with a force like something I'd never seen before. I mean, it was incredible. He didn't last long, but the power and the way he attacked this, well, actually, I think we were using a lure that time. The way he attacked that lure was just unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. And I mean, who knows? Maybe that would have been the Gulf of Mexico record.
You never landed this one, never boated it.
No, he didn't stay on long, but just the force that he hit with was just incredible. I'll never forget that. But yeah, that's really one of my most memorable experiences out there. We've caught some nice fish too. I've caught a few blue marlin, not a big one like that. I've caught a few of them, and we caught a swordfish one time in the middle of the night. That one put up a good fight too.
I was once on a swordfish trip, but it never happened. Yeah, just fish didn't show up. But it's like overnight.
Well, they're like that. You're not going to get them.
Talking about the glowing.
Yeah, the glow stick. Yeah. Here they fish them for daytime now. That's only become popular in the last 10 or 12 years or so. Daytime sword fishing. They pretty much use the same tactics, but now they do them in the day. Whereas before they used to do them only at night.
Are there any regulations, any restrictions about doing it at night, or is it like not regulated? You can do whatever.
No regulations on that.
Oh, okay. So it's always interests me, like how different countries and like in your case, different states regulate fishing and so on. To, like you said, preserve the resources. Staying on the theme of fish. Tell me about the cobia fishing, because cobia is like a fish. It's a fish that I remember like one of my fishing trips abroad. One of the most memorable fish I caught. The meat of cobia and the size and the look of the fish and the power of the fish and when I was fishing for cobia, obviously I was like a tourist angler who didn't know anything about it. It's like, oh, I guess we have look at this, right? But you were in your book, you're talking very deliberately about spotting cobias and cobia fishing. So if you could give us a little bit of a description of like how does it look like?
The cobia looks like a big catfish. That's the best. They're brownish on the top and white with a white belly on the bottom. The way we fish for them here in Destin is they come around up close to the beach when you're in the tower of your boat, and you're always looking for brown spots in the water that look a little different than the color surrounding him. When you spot one, it's very important to keep your eye on him. Never take your eye off him, because once you take your eye off him, you might not find him again. And the way we fish for them is we have a spinning reel ready with a bait already attached to it, and then we throw it in front of them. And
is it artificial bait or is it natural bait?
Well, both. We can use both. You can use eels. You can use little pinfish called chofers. You can use jigs. Anything like that. A jig is a lure. And usually with a jig, you'll flick your wrist to give it a live look in the water for the fish. And cobias can get really big, Sometimes you can get them 100 pounds, anywhere from 50 to 100 pounds, even more sometimes. And they swim in great big schools. Like it's not uncommon to see a school of 30 to 50 cobias swimming up towards the beach. What they do is they migrate around Florida up through the coast and to Louisiana where they spawn.
Is it popular to fish for cobia?
Yeah, and they're really, really tasty. They're really good to eat, cobias are.
Yeah, I remember that. That's like one of those fish that give you a great sport and also great to eat. Usually not good combination for the fish because they get hammered. But then again, if you have it properly regulated. Are there any regulations on cobia fishing?
I think there are. I think there's only allowed two per person now. Whereas before you could get as many as, as you saw, you could get them because they were abundant, So now they want to preserve them. So I think they're only allowing 2 per person.
Okay. Gotcha.
But a lot of times with cobia fishing, well, like every fishing, you just don't know. You might get 0 some days, You just don't see them some days. Yeah.
As we say, that's fishing.
Yeah, that's fishing. That's exactly right. Yeah.
That's what it is. Bob, listen, in your book, you are describing on more than one occasion a kind of like a hairy and sketchy situations with the weather. So tell me how, because obviously people who, they're watching YouTube videos of fishing in Florida and, the people get hot and there's girls in bikinis and nice sun and everything is perfect. But it's not always that perfect. So can you just lay it out to us? What are the weather patterns and what are the things to look out for, and just to maybe spoil that picture of like a fishing paradise, because it can be quite dangerous.
It can be. You always want to check your marine forecasts. Usually, if winds get to a certain speed, they'll say a marine forecast is a small craft advisory. A small craft being anything under 60 feet. So you should stay in port that day and not go out. Here we have the fronts that push through. We get a lot of fronts. So it's good you can go in between the fronts, but always be aware of when the fronts might be coming through. Some years are very calm. You could go 3 months, 6 months with calm weather all the time, and then the pattern changes, and you might go a whole month when the wind is blowing every day. So you just have to always be aware of the weather forecasting, and always be safe out there, because the ocean can turn on an instant. So you always want to, even when you're out there, always checking the weather, always checking the radar to see where the thunderstorms might be, and that sort of thing. Watching the swells. I talked about one time where the swells started to repeat themselves after we went out on a beautiful day to start the day, and the swell started to, and then on the way back we ran into a thunderstorm, and we felt like the crew from Gilligan's Island, bouncing around out there. But we made it back safely, and it was fun.
What are the months that are those weather patterns? Like, what do you know? Like, what months are the good ones for fishing? If someone would like to, go to Florida.
Well, usually in Florida in the summer, you get your thunderstorms because of the heat. And a lot of times you might get what they call as a water spout out there. The tornadoes, the twister on the ocean is called a water spout. We get some of those too. Usually in the summertime, though. The wintertime pattern is usually calmer. The weather settles down. There's no threat of a hurricane in the wintertime. So it's, but fishing is good all year around here. It does. Certain fish run at certain times, like the what they call the pelagic fish, like the marlins and the wahoos and the mahi-mahis and things like that, are usually in the spring through the summer. And then in the winter,
what months would that be? Spring to summer?
Probably from like April until October in northern Florida.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then from like October to April, you fish usually for amberjack or red snapper or a grouper or triggerfish. Those kind of fish are here all year round.
If anyone who is like in the UK or Ireland or in Europe in general would like to go for, let's say, 2-3 weeks fishing trip to Florida, what month would you recommend to have like maximum opportunity to have a good fishing, but at the same time probably not go into like the peak tourist season? Like I don't know, like what would be the month that you would recommend just to get a taste of fishing in Florida?
I think September is probably the best month all around, because school starts and there's not as many tourists, and the weather's still really good and the fish are still out there. So if you're going to come in September or October, but the September's really good.
Oh, okay. That's a good tip. That's a good tip, folks. Mark your calendars. September, Florida fishing. And listen, should you book the charter beforehand before you go, or is it like you can find the good charters once you're already there? How does that work?
Well, I think you could do it either way, but it's usually better if there's a charter boat that you really like or somebody recommends to you. I would book it in advance, because they do get booked up, So if you're going to do that, I book it way in advance.
Do you know what costs we're talking about if you want to book like a week?
Well, it depends on how long you want to go, and that's
when you're gonna go, right? The trip for a marlin would be way more expensive than the fish in shore. Yeah, but like speaking, like a reasonable angler who is like a dedicated to his craft, likes angling, and wants this, like a bucket list fishing trip to Florida. How much would you recommend to have, like, for the charter and for the all the things related to fishing?
For a party boat, if you don't want to spend a lot of money and just enjoy the experiences, you can go out there relatively cheap, anywhere from $100 to $200 or $300 usually per person, and they supply all the rods and reels and the bait and everything, and you could go out there for pretty much a full day for that price. Now, a charter boat, they get a little more expensive. A charter boat that could take up to 6 people, where you could split the cost 6 ways, for like 6 or 8 hour trip, might be, couple $1,000, maybe $2,000 or $3,000 plus tip. So you want to split that. Make sure if you don't want to pay for it all yourself, get other people to go with you, and you can split it. They have walk-on charters. Well, they'll have people who already want to go, and you don't have to book in advance. You'll see at the booths where they book the trips, or if you call the captains, they'll tell you, oh, I have certain people who want to go on a certain day, and you want to split the charter with them to help on the costs. But a charter boat these days, and if you want to go for even longer, it's more like a 12-hour day, maybe like $4,000. So you want to make sure that that if you're going to go out there, you plan away in advance.
So that's the moment when you're kind of like planning and calling people, and you're booking and you're pre-booking this stuff and so on. Yeah. And so here's my another question for sort of like a people who would like to do it, and after reading your book and they just got so fired up, which they will. When you're talking about fighting like a big game fish, right, like a marlin or tuna, tell me, like, what is the preparation like physically? Because I presume, like, if you're a total couch potato, you shouldn't even try, because it's a hard work. So can you just tell us a little bit of a like a physical aspect of fighting that big fish? How long it takes and what it consists of.
Well, it definitely helps to be in good shape, that's for sure. But if you do hook a big fish, though, it doesn't matter how good a shape you're in. You still have to have the proper equipment. Otherwise, the fish has the advantage. You're on his territory, and he's bigger than you are. So you definitely want to be prepared with the right rods and reels, the right baits, the right everything. Sometimes if you're going to catch big fish like that, it helps to have a harness and a chair to put, if you're going to fight a big fish, because it could last several hours. You could get a big tuna or a big marlin, and it could go anywhere from 2 or 3 hours to, I've heard, even 8 or 9 hour fights with some of these big fish. I've never had one like that myself, but yeah, that could happen. So you want to definitely be prepared, and it helps to be in good shape, that's for sure. But I will say, when you're out there in the water more regularly, you do develop sea legs. So it that doesn't quite affect you as bad. It's like anything else, the more you do it, the better you get at it.
So if someone was just like fishing inshore, maybe going like a little fish, to the sea to catch cod and whatever, you probably wouldn't recommend to go straight after big marlin, kind of like a try groupers
I would
and
probably
wahoos.
start out. Yeah. Sometimes can from the beach, you can catch nice fish from the beach sometimes, especially in the Caribbean. The water gets deep there real quick. And you don't even have to go that far offshore to catch wahoos and dolphins and things like that. Sometimes within sight of land, a couple 100 yards off the beach, you can land a nice fish in certain places. And you don't have to worry as much about the weather, because you could just scoot back in really quick in case. Yeah,
that's true. That's very true. Let's go back for a second to the weather patterns. By the way, how big is the tide? Is the tide in Florida big? It's kind of like enclosed in the Gulf.
Yeah, the Florida tides are not very big. They're a couple feet both ways. They're not very big at all. The Gulf of Mexico, for the most part, is not a rough body of water. It's usually calm most of the time, compared to other places like the North Atlantic and Alaska, places like that. I think Ireland too is really rough.
Well, man, like, tell me about it. Like, we're fishing on the North Atlantic. It can be.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's hard to find a day. Sometimes it's hard to find a day when you can go out, basically, because the skipper won't go.
Wow. Yeah, but anyway, the Gulf of Mexico usually, for the most part, is not a rough body of water. So most days are going to be pretty good out there.
What was your most sketchy moment on the boat, like weather-wise?
I had 2 sketchy moments that I can remember. One of them was that one I told you about, when we went out on a really nice day and the swells began to develop, and 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 10-second intervals, and I was like, wow, we better get out of here. So yeah, we came back on that one, and we got pounded with a thunderstorm on the way in. And then another time, I was coming back from Key West back up to Destin, and I got really rough weather too through the western side of Florida, and it was really rough that time too. We putzed into to the marina with hardly any fuel. We made it back in there.
Yeah. Was it bad? Like, did you have like a wondering whether you're gonna make it back, or were you like reasonably prepared for it?
No, we were prepared. You're always prepared out there. You always have to go out there prepared. We knew we would make it back. It was rough, but we knew we would be back.
How likely it is that you could be just completely caught off guard? Or is it like when you pay attention to the advisory and the weather forecast, then you're pretty safe? Or are there cases where you just can be like completely caught off guard? It's like, oh my God, I didn't, you're too far.
Every once in a while, you can hear stories of boats that get caught off guard. But for the most part, if you know what you're doing and you take all the precautions and you make sure you do everything right, you're going to be safe most of the time. Or not even most of the time, almost all the time. I mean, there are exceptions like to everything, and a lot of times those exceptions are because somebody forgot to do this or this wasn't prepared for, so, if you know what you're doing, just be safe out there, dot all the I's, cross all the T's, and you should be all right.
Right. There's no goofing around with the ocean, right?
Yeah.
It's a serious force and you're dealing with the elements. Yeah, and you're describing in your book one of the like these sketchy things when one of your buddy's drawbridge is like with his girlfriend on the boat, and it's like, oh man, like this is not good. I was reading this like, no man, this is not good.
That was probably the most rough weather that any of us had ever experienced. I wasn't on the boat that time, but it was just him and his girlfriend, and they went through a really rough weather that wasn't predicted between Key West and Cuba. In that area, it got really rough. And they spent the whole night out there tossing around for like 11 hours until the weather finally broke, and they made it to a port in Cancun, Mexico. And they lived to tell about it.
And there was like a funny thing as well, which we're not going to say on the podcast. People need to read the book, but with the beer that the guy had on board. Like,
yeah,
this is like crazy.
Yeah.
anyway, folks, you got to get the boat book, flicker in the water, and read about it, because it's worth. And like I was saying on the top of the show, it's just a fun book to read with all the photos. What's the story with Goliath groupers? Because you cannot even take them out of the water, right? They changed the regulations that you need to keep them in the water at all times.
They were, for a long time, they were on the endangered list. They were almost depleted, but there's a lot of them now. They've made an unbelievable comeback. You could catch them in Florida, all over the place, and not in deep water, too. They're the biggest grouper in the grouper family. They can get 700, 800, 900 pounds, but they're in shallow water, usually in 100 feet or less of water, under bridges, pilings, even from the beach. Sometimes I've heard people catch these Goliath groupers. They're all over the place now. I'm not sure if you can keep them or not, but they all are all over so they're plentiful. And they're good to eat. Some people say the meat is a little tough. The smaller groupers are better. But there are a lot of them out there.
It's good to hear that they recovered so quickly. It's one of those things, right? If you let the fish, if you let the nature and the fish to kind of like leave them alone for a while, they can recover surprisingly quickly, because they're supposed to be slow growing fish, and like you say, they're somewhere in the pylons and like structures in the water. We're jumping a little bit from subject to subject, but it's such a rare occasion to talk about those things. So I'm sure listeners will forgive me to kind of like switching a little bit chaotically. You were fishing a lot around the oil rigs. I'm not sure if it's in the Gulf of Mexico, but I believe that it is. That some of those oil rigs they're not used for a long time. They're just basically decommissioned or abandoned, and they're creating this like an artificial reef, which is like there's an abundance of fish around it. So it's a great place to fish. But then there are some I don't know if it's environmental folks or whatever who have a project to remove those, to kind of like a clean up. And then there's this discussion that like, this is actually doing more harm than good, because you're just basically removing habitat for the fish. Did I get this right? Is this thing going on in Florida as well?
They do. They drop artificial reefs all the time. Sometimes you'll see like a decommissioned ship sunk, so the vegetation can grow and it becomes a habitat for the fish. I think they do things now that they did not used to do before because of environmental concerns like tires and things like that. They don't put down there because they're rubber, and they don't decompose or anything. The oil rigs, some of them dry up, so they do move from oil rig to oil rig. Here in Florida, they've been trying to lobby to have oil rigs for a while. It has never succeeded. Some people don't want to have them within sight of the beaches because of the tourism. And they feel like the oil rigs in the Western Gulf or around Louisiana and Texas, they feel like they dirty the water. The water becomes more murky, and they want to keep the water clear here in our area. So they're not allowing any oil rigs in, but they do. They sink ships every once in a while in cages and things like that. And it usually works out better for the fish because in about a year or two after you sink one of these things, it's loaded with fish.
And is there much commercial fishing pressure on those fish? Or is it only recreational?
Yeah, I mean, they're regulated too, though. The commercial fish are very regulated. We do have them. They go out for sometimes a week two at a time, and they have nets and they catch snappers and groupers and that sort of thing in our area. There are shrimp boats all over the place too.
I'm asking because when you said about the artificial reefs, there were off the coast of Cork here in Ireland, there are some wrecks. And we, it's like a long steam to get to those wrecks. And on a few occasions, we would get to wrecks, and it turns out that the wreck is just wrapped with the net. And it's like, okay, so I guess no fishing here. So they were completely, either wiped or just basically wrapped with the net. So that was a bummer. But I guess again, you folks in the U.S., and this is like a reoccurring theme, you so much better regulated in terms of Look, like I said, and I said it many times that the book might look like a modest at first go, but that man, it's really good, and I appreciate you sending me the autographed copy. So it's nice.
Yeah, sure, Tommy. I appreciate it. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, but
and also. To your listeners, go to the website, flickerinthewater.com, where there's a lot of stuff on there that's not in the book that you like too. Yeah. Very interesting.
Yes. And we, as always, we're going to put the link in the show notes to your website, and I'm gonna send that information in the newsletter as well, so folks can click.
Oh, great! Yeah,
cool, Bob. Listen, is there anything that we didn't cover yet? Something that you think it's worth talking about, and I never asked you about it.
I want to say also, Tommy, for anyone who's ever read The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, I mean, it's his granddaughter Mariel. I should see that there, Mariel Hemingway. She wrote the foreword for my book.
Yeah. I noticed that. It was great. How did you locate her and get her to
Mariel works with my publisher, Mindster Media. They give her a script, and if she likes a script, she'll write the foreword for it. And thankfully, she liked mine, and she made it a member of her book club.
Oh, so excellent.
Yeah. She said the book spoke to her with a deep sense of appreciation, which, it really meant a lot to me. Anybody who's ever fished knows about The Old Man and the Sea. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's a classic. Bob, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Once again, congratulations on the book. The website is Flicker on the Water. Link in the description of the show. So folks, go in there, read the website, and get the book. You won't regret it. Bob, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tommy. It was great.